role, both at home and abroad. Internationally, she's had consultancies on gender and development issues, on various issues, in fact, of development. So she's one of the intellectuals we recognize in the Gambia and in Africa and beyond. And I want to recognize her duly. And she's our consultant for this particular International Women's Day conference. Yes, gender and development. In fact, she was in charge of the gender and development program at the University of the Gambia. So Mrs. Almeida, thank you for coming, and thank you for being there all the time when we need you. I want to recognize my colleague, the Honorable Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, who also doubles as the chairperson of the National Women's Council. She's also always been there for women, we all know, whether at the level of the National Assembly or at the level of council. Madam, we want to recognize you and thank you as well. And she's a member of the Women's Federation as well. I want to recognize my colleague ministers, cabinet colleagues here present. The Honorable Minister of Basic and Secondary Education, Honorable Fatou Lamin Faye, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, of course, whose mother also was the second Executive Director of the Women's Bureau. Mrs. Safiatou Singate was my boss. I want to recognize her, even though she's not here because she would have loved to be here, but due to unavoidable circumstances, she couldn't. And I recognize her as well. And all other former executive directors of the Women's Bureau. Siga Jan was there, Ida Fai Hydra was there. There were many others who were there. Because today is a Women's Day, we have to recognize all of them for the pivotal role that they played in moving the women's agenda forward. But we have former chairpersons of Women's Council here as well. And those unavoidably absent, and we want to recognize them. Kasasane has been just recognized. She was a chairperson of the Women's Council as well. And there were other previous chairpersons. In fact, the present Minister of Basic and Secondary Education was also the chairperson of Council. And Zulu Jame, yes, there are many others, ma'am. There were many other chairpersons, even during the First Republic. We want to recognize them. Of course, the Minister of Health is here. We don't want to segregate our men. Health is critical to women's development. And we want to duly recognize you as well. We want to recognize our dear guests here as well. I know we have Tokozile, you are here with us, from the ECA, Gender and Development Division. We want to duly recognize you. She's always been supportive of our programs in the Ministry of Women's Affairs and the Women's Bureau, particularly the Africa Gender Development Index. She played a pivotal role in making sure that's adequately funded. We want to thank you, Madam. And of course, we all remember Beijing Plus 15 that was held in the Gambia. And of course, side by side was the AU meeting on women. And Toko played a very pivotal role in that meeting as well. So Toko, thank you for coming. We want to recognize, of course, our own sister, the Executive Director of the Gender and Development Center of the ECOWAS in Dakar, Ami Diba. She was a Permanent Secretary, Office of the Vice President and Ministry of Women's Affairs as well. We want to duly recognize her. I know there could be other honorable members of the National Assembly. They would have loved to be here, but you know they're on a retreat in Janjambore. So we want to recognize those who are able to make it to this meeting. Of course, we have our distinguished international delegates from the sister Republic of Senegal, Soukaina Touré and Rozo Rapid. We want to recognize you, Julie, and your cultural group as well. We want to recognize our sisters from Nigeria. And of course, in their midst is the former Minister for Aviation. Madam, we want to recognize you, Julie, as well. There are other former speakers as well here present. Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Fatoumata Jahou Passissé is here with us. Of course, there are other speakers who are unavoidably absent. We want to recognize them because today is Women's Day, like I said. They need to be recognized. Mrs. Renner and many others. We have the former First Lady of the Republic of the Gambia, the First Republic, Mrs. Jebe Jawara, we want to duly recognize you as well. Of course, we have the UN system here present under the leadership of the UN resident representative and resident coordinator of the UN system in the Gambia. Madam, thank you. We want to recognize you for all the support you've been giving to our programs, and indeed other members of the UN system here present. We have, of course, our religious leaders. You've already heard from the Methodist Mission, Anna Falhain, Bishop now. We want to recognize you and recognize the Imam that just led us in prayers and other members of the religious community here present. I know we have our mayors and governors and alcalis, and we want to recognize our female governor, of course, Sifai Hydra, being the first female governor, and other mayors and governors here present. We want to recognize the alcalis here present, Alkali Sow and Alkali Hadipani. And there were other 3 alcalis who cannot make it to this meeting. We want to duly recognize you. I think on this table I've recognized, I hope, the President of the Women's Federation as well, the Executive Director of the Women's Bureau, the Permanent Secretary Office of the Vice President, and all other permanent secretaries and senior government officials here present. I want to recognize the service chiefs, as well as all the security services here present. And indeed, there are other members of the international community, the EU representative, and other members of the international community here present. We want to recognize our women councillors, our mobilizers, the women mobilizer, present and past. Aissatou Jifanga Jaju, and of course there is the past women mobilizer as well. Ndeye Jata is here with us, and other women mobilizers. We want to recognize our women councillors as well. Women's Federation members, every woman here, I presume, is a Federation member. I want to recognize them duly. We want to recognize, of course, the Africa Women's Forum. I know the Africa Women's Advancement Forum is here. Some of their delegates are here. We want to recognize them from this region, Nigeria and other countries. They're all here. We want to duly recognize you as well. We want to recognize all the head YI companies here present. Madam, Mrs. Almeida, we want to recognize the other facilitators that are here with you, the presenters, the panelists, the discussants, all of them that played a part in making this conference a success. And they're going to make it a success for the next 2 days. We want to thank them and recognize them duly as well. And of course, there are the technicians. There are always people behind the scenes that we don't see. I'm reading just here, Sanes equipment. I'm sure those are the technicians that are in charge of the translation equipment, the interpreters as well. We want to recognize you. We want to recognize the hotel management, Amilet, Ndao, and Mr. Ndao, and staff of Paradise Suites Hotel. Definitely, we want to thank you. You've always been there for us. We want to recognize the representative of the media here present. USAS, protocol, security, delegates, of course, to this conference. Cultural groups, Kabekel, of course, there is the Agua Tole Kafo group, and our sisters from Senegal as well. I think it's the Serere group, I presume. Yes, we want to recognize them, duly. And just to cut it short, I think all other protocols, I hope I didn't leave anybody, all other protocols duly and respectfully observed, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, of course, I join the previous speakers in bringing you greetings and best wishes from our president, the patron of women in the Gambia and in Africa as a whole, His Excellency the President, Sheikh Professor Al-Haji Dr. Yaya AJJ Jammeh, who is the Commander-in-Chief, of course, of the Gambia Armed Forces. And as I do so, I also bring you greetings from the First Lady of the Gambia, Her Excellency Madam Zainab Yahya Jammeh,